She arrived at the base at dawn, the air heavy with the scent of iron and smoke, and the sound of boots striking the dirt. The soldiers moved in perfect lines, their eyes fixed ahead, their discipline sharp and unyielding. She stepped through the gates. Without hesitation, her steps measured, her presence quiet. No trumpet, no announcement, no grand declaration followed her arrival. She wore a uniform plain, without rank or insignia. Her hair tied neatly, her expression unreadable to the guards at the entrance. She looked like any recruit, perhaps too young, perhaps too fragile to endure the harshness of this place, but something in her eyes made them hesitate for a moment before waving her through. The camp stretched wide, rows of barracks, standing like silent sentinels, each window glowing faintly with the fire of lamps. Inside, soldiers marched in the yard, their chants echoing through the morning air. Commanding officers barked orders, their voices sharp, their words striking like steel. Yet she walked past them unnoticed, her head held steady, her steps neither hurried nor slow. She carried no bag, no weapon, only a small journal tucked under her arm, her hands steady, her gaze forward as if she knew exactly where to go. No one greeted her. No one stopped her. The base was too busy with the rhythm of war preparation, drills, weapons inspections, meals eaten in silence. The soldiers who passed her gave her only brief glances, their minds consumed by duty. She did not appear to mind their indifference. In fact, she seemed to move with an ease that suggested she preferred the shadows over the spotlight. She slipped between squads, like water through stone, leaving no ripple of attention behind her. Yet for those who happened to notice her, they found something odd about the way she carried herself. A recruit normally shuffled, nervous eyes darting, uncertain hands, clumsy with straps and belts. She, however, moved with balance, with a quiet poise that spoke of control. One soldier muttered to another that she did not walk like them, she walked like someone who had already seen the battlefield. The other dismissed it with a shrug, for what did it matter, in a base filled with hundreds? One quiet girl meant nothing. The officers did not pause for her. They did not demand her papers or question her silence. They had seen countless faces come and go, recruits arriving daily, some breaking within weeks, others enduring to rise slowly through the ranks, and yet none ever arrived without fear or doubt clinging to their steps. She was different. She carried no fear, at least none visible. Her eyes scanned every detail, the yard, the walls, the watchtowers, her gaze sharp like a blade, studying everything and storing it away. When the sun rose higher, painting the camp in gold, she found herself standing at the edge of the training grounds. Lines of soldiers drilled under the command of their sergeants, sweat glistening on their brows, dust rising with every stomp. She did not join them, she simply watched, her expression still unreadable, as if waiting for something, as if the drills meant nothing to her, as if she had already mastered them long ago. And so her first day passed. Like a whisper, she came unnoticed. She moved unnoticed, and when night fell, she vanished into the barracks without a word. Her presence, like smoke, impossible to hold, yet lingering enough that those who saw her even briefly could not quite forget the calm in her eyes or the way she seemed to belong, even though no one could place who she was or what she came for. The days that followed unfolded with the rhythm of discipline. Drills rang out across the yard, shouts of command split the air, boots struck the dirt in unison. Yet in the midst of all this noise, she remained quiet, moving through the camp like a shadow, her uniform still plain, her insignia absent, her face calm and unreadable. The others began to notice, not through her words, but through her silence. At meals, she sat alone at the corner of the hall, her tray untouched, longer than most, as if she had no urgency to eat. Her eyes drifted over the room, quietly studying every detail, while the others kept their heads down or laughed loudly in groups. She never laughed, she never joined, she never explained herself to anyone, and this silence stirred curiosity among the restless young soldiers who had nothing to speak of except drills, punishments, and rumors. One soldier whispered to another that she walked with a confidence no recruit should have, her back straight, her stride steady, her eyes sharp, like she was not learning but remembering. Another said he had seen her during weapon drills, and though she held the rifle for the first time, her grip was perfect, her movements smoother than even the sergeant who corrected her stance. The whispers spread quietly from table to table, from barracks to barracks. The officers to Babafta began to notice, though they said nothing openly. During inspections, when recruits scrambled nervously, she stood motionless, her face calm, her posture precise. When ordered to run, she did not stumble. When commanded to hold, she never faltered. She was neither the fastest nor the strongest, but she was unshaken, like stone standing against the tide. One lieutenant muttered under his breath that she had the discipline of someone who had already worn the uniform for years, though her plain attire told another story. The mystery only deepened when the soldiers tried to speak to her one after another. They asked simple questions: where she was from, how long she had been in training, what unit she had transferred from, and every time her answers were short, so short they gave no clue, and the silence that followed seemed heavier than any words could have been. Some grew frustrated, others grew cautious, but none could deny the pull of curiosity she inspired that night when the barracks dimmed and conversations floated in hushed tones. Her name would slip through the whispers, though no one knew if she truly had given it, or if the soldiers invented one for her. They spoke of how she never fidgeted, how she slept lightly, as if ready to rise at any noise, how her eyes in the dark seemed to glow faintly with thought, and how even the sergeants who barked at everyone else seemed hesitant to linger. On her rumors spread that she was not a recruit at all, that she had been sent to test the discipline of the camp, that perhaps she was a spy or worse, an officer in disguise. Some dismissed it as foolish talk, yet when they saw her again in the morning, standing tall, unshaken by the cold or the drills, the rumors returned, stronger than before, and so her silence grew heavier each day. It filled the camp with tension, with speculation. No one dared confront her directly, but no one could ignore her. Either she was a shadow walking among them, unnoticed by command perhaps, but unforgettable to every eye that dared to look. Whispers alone could not contain the tension that grew around her. Every step she took seemed to invite questions, and every silence she offered in return only deepened the mystery. The soldiers who first dismissed her as a quiet recruit now found themselves restless around her. They wondered who she truly was, and why she carried herself as if the camp belonged to her. One evening during weapons training, a group of recruits decided to test her. They handed her the heaviest rifle in the rack, a weapon meant for those with far greater strength than her frame suggested. They smirked, waiting to see her stumble, waiting to prove that she was nothing more than a mystery wrapped in silence. But she lifted the weapon with ease, her grip firm, her eyes steady. She adjusted the scope with precision, fired once, and struck the target dead center. The laughter that was meant to humiliate her turned into silence, heavier than the ringing of the shot. Another day during endurance drills, the sergeant ordered the recruits to run laps around the training yard under the blazing sun. Sweat poured down backs and breaths came heavy, but she ran with the same steady rhythm from beginning to end, her pace never faltering. While others collapsed in the dust, she kept moving her steps, measured her breath, calm, her presence unnerving to those who had mocked her only hours before. Whispers rippled again across the camp, this time carrying more awe than doubt. The officers noticed her too, though they spoke little. Their eyes lingered longer during inspections. One captain paused when he saw her posture flawless, while others shifted. Nervously, the captain asked her a question about her previous station, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. She met his gaze without hesitation, answered in words so few they revealed nothing, yet carried enough weight to silence further inquiry. The captain moved on, though his expression was unsettled. The recruits grew bold in their curiosity. Some tried to corner her in the barracks at night, pressing her with questions, demanding to know her past, demanding to know why she never revealed her rank. She sat quietly listening, and when they had finished, she stood and looked at each one in the eye. Her silence was enough. They stepped back as though they had been confronted by something far greater than themselves. Wit was not just her skill, it was the aura that surrounded her. She did not boast, she did not complain, she did not fear punishment or humiliation. She carried herself as if she had already endured trials far harsher than the camp could ever provide, and in that unshakable calm the others began to see, not a recruit but something else, something higher. The more they tried to test her, the more she revealed without revealing. The more they tried to break her, the more unbreakable she seemed, and with every test passed their whispers grew into a quiet reverence. She was no longer just the girl in the plain uniform, she was the figure they all watched when she entered the yard, the presence that unsettled even the officers, and though her rank remained hidden, it no longer mattered, for the truth began to settle in their hearts that she was not who she appeared to be. The camp woke before dawn to the sound of a trumpet, a sharp blast that split the air and shook the barracks. The recruits scrambled to their feet, pulling on uniforms, lacing boots, standing in hurried lines. The officers shouted commands with a force sharper than usual. Urgency thickened the air like smoke, and no one dared question why, until the announcement came. The general was arriving. The name alone sent ripples through the camp. The general was a figure spoken of in hushed voices, a man who carried more power than entire battalions. His presence was said to break the will of soldiers with a glance, his reputation woven from countless battles, and unshakable authority. To stand before him was to be measured, stripped, and judged with no mercy for failure. The recruits whispered nervously, trading stories about his wrath and the punishments he delivered without hesitation. The camp transformed within hours, every weapon polished, every uniform inspected, every barrack scrubbed until the wood gleamed under the morning sun. The officers barked louder than ever, their eyes sharp, their patience gone. Mistakes that once earned scolding now earned strikes. Recruits who faltered found themselves shoved into line with threats hissed into their ears. No one was spared. The weight of expectation through all this chaos. She remained calm, her movements steady, as always, her expression unreadable. She polished her boots, slowly adjusted her uniform with quiet precision, and marched when told without falter. The recruits glanced at her, some expecting to see fear etched across her face as it was across theirs, but they found only the same calm silence that unsettled them. From the start it was as if the coming of the general meant nothing to her, as if she had already faced worse. The whispers returned louder than before, soldiers huddled in corners, muttering about what would happen when the general laid eyes on her. One claimed she would crumble, another insisted she would be exposed. Whatever secret she held would be dragged into the light. Others whispered the opposite, that perhaps the couple general himself would recognize her, that perhaps she was far greater than any of them imagined. The uncertainty twisted through the camp, filling it with restless energy. By midday, the yard was lined with ranks of soldiers' boots, perfectly aligned uniforms gleaming under the harsh sun. Sweat rolled down faces, yet none dared move, none dared break formation. Officers stalked between the lines, snapping at the smallest errors. The tension was thick enough to choke every heart, beat heavy and slow every breath, a reminder of the storm approaching. She stood among them, her posture flawless, her gaze fixed forward, the plain uniform no longer able to hide the quiet weight she carried. Even without insignia, she looked as though she belonged at the center of command, not the edge of a line. Some of the recruits near her felt it, and their nerves faltered even more. Silence was louder than their pounding hearts when the sound of engines rumbled in the distance, dust rising beyond the gates. A shiver ran through the camp. The general was coming, the man who could make captains tremble, the man who had broken seasoned warriors without a word. And somewhere deep inside each soldier braced themselves for the weight of his gaze. And yet as the ground shook with the approach of his convoy, she did not stir, she did not flinch, she simply stood ready, as though she had been waiting for this moment all along. The ground trembled beneath the weight of armored vehicles as the convoy rolled into the camp. Engines roaring, dust clouds rising into the air. The soldiers stood frozen in their lines, their uniforms gleaming, their backs rigid. The officers barked one final command to hold formation. Then silence fell as the convoy came to a halt at the edge of the yard. The door of the lead vehicle opened slowly, and the general stepped out, his boots striking the ground with the weight of authority. His frame, tall, broad shoulders draped in a cloak heavy with medals, his chest covered in insignia, each one earned through blood and conquest. His face carved with stern lines, his eyes sharp and cold as steel. The air seemed to bend around him. Every soldier felt it, the crushing weight of his presence. He walked forward slowly, each step deliberate, each sound of his boots echoing across the yard like thunder. The officers snapped to attention, their eyes straight, their voices gone. The recruits stood trembling beneath his gaze, afraid to move, afraid even to breathe too loudly, for fear of drawing his attention. The general did not need to speak for silence to rule. His presence commanded it without effort. He stopped in front of the first row, his eyes sweeping over the soldiers one by one. Each man and woman held their breath as his gaze lingered upon them. He seemed to pierce through uniforms and flesh and bone, as if searching for weakness hidden deep inside. No recruit could hide their fear. Some trembled slightly, some clenched their jaws, desperately fighting to remain still. But the general saw all. He moved slowly down the line, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice finally breaking the silence, sharp and deep, demanding names, ranks, origins. His questions struck like whips, and every answer came rushed, nervous, trembling. The soldiers answered too quickly or too softly, and his gaze cut them down with quiet judgment. No outburst needed, only a narrowing of his eyes, and each soldier felt their worth collapse beneath him. The line shifted as he continued his inspection, and yet one figure stood out. She did not tremble, she did not break her gaze. She did not stumble over words, for she had not spoken at all. She remained silent, her eyes fixed forward, her posture steady, her breathing calm like stone amidst the storm. The general's gaze reached her, and for the first time his stride slowed. He studied her face closely, his sharp eyes narrowing, his silence stretching longer than with any other soldier. The recruits near her felt their hearts pounding. They sensed the shift. They felt that something hung in the air. The general tilted his head slightly, as if measuring something unseen. And though he spoke nothing, yet his presence pressed heavier upon her than upon anyone else. Still, she did not flinch. She stood as she always had, calm, poised, unshaken, her plain uniform revealing nothing, her silence louder than the nervous chatter of those around her. The general's lips curved, faintly, not into a smile but into something darker, something unreadable. Then he turned his gaze away and continued down the line, yet the tension did not break. It deepened instead, for everyone who saw knew that he had noticed her, and in noticing her, he had marked her. The line of soldiers stood frozen as the general continued his inspection, his presence heavy as stone pressing down upon every chest. His boots struck the ground with rhythm like a drum of war, each step echoing in the silence, each pause sharper than the lash of a whip. He passed recruit after recruit, his gaze sharp, his questions cutting, but his mind lingered on the girl. He had just seen the one who had not trembled. He turned back slightly, as if drawn again toward her, though his voice remained calm. The air around her grew heavier than before. The soldiers beside her shifted, uneasily, trying not to be caught in the invisible storm that seemed to gather at her feet. She remained motionless, her back straight, her eyes forward, unshaken by the weight of his gaze. The silence thickened, every soldier waiting for the general to speak, waiting for him to call her out, waiting for her to break. Yet she did not, and it was she, not the general, who moved first. Her boots struck the ground. As she stepped out of formation, the sound loud against the silence, and in that single step the entire yard seemed to inhale as one. The officers snapped their heads toward her, their faces twisted in fury, their voices ready to lash out, but the words froze in their throats. No recruit was permitted to break formation. No one dared to move without command, and yet she walked forward slowly, her posture flawless, her gaze fixed not on the ground, not on the officers, but directly on the general. Soldiers watched in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. Fear coiled in their stomachs. Some expected her to be struck down instantly, to be dragged away in chains. Yet she did not falter. Her steps carried her steadily across the yard until she stood just far enough from the general, her figure small against his towering presence, but her calm heavier than his shadow. When she finally spoke, her voice rang clear-cutting through the silence like a blade, her words simple yet sharp. She asked permission to speak or command, her tone steady. Her eyes locked onto his, unflinching. The sound carried across the yard, and every soldier felt it pierce through them. None had expected such words. None had dared to even imagine a recruit addressing the general with such defiance, yet she had spoken it aloud. The general did not answer immediately. He stared at her, his face unreadable, his eyes burning into hers. The silence stretched longer, heavier, until the soldiers around them thought they might suffocate under the weight of it. The officers exchanged glances, their mouths tight, their hands clenched, unable to decide if they should intervene or wait for the general to strike. But he did not strike, he did not shout. He only stood there facing her, his gaze locked with hers, as if testing her, as if measuring her in ways no one else could understand. And the soldiers who watched felt something shift in the air. For the first time in their lives they saw a figure stand before the general, not broken, not trembling, but steady and unyielding. The air was heavy enough to choke the recruits, standing frozen in formation. No one dared to move, no one dared to breathe. Too loudly her words still hung in the air, sharp and impossible to ignore. Permission to speak or command, the phrase repeated in every mind, like an echo burning itself deeper with every heartbeat. The officers stood rigid, their faces pale, some ready to bark orders, but their voices failed them, for even they knew this was no ordinary breach of discipline. This was something else, something none of them could define. The general stared at her, his eyes narrowed, his jaw tight, his silence stretching on and on. The soldiers began to wonder if he would break it with fury or with violence. Yet she did not flinch, her eyes never wavered, her posture never faltered. She looked at him not as a recruit looks at a superior, but as an equal, as if she had every right to stand in front of him and demand a choice. Her presence filled the yard, heavier than the sun that beat down on their backs. Her calm carved itself into the minds of every witness until their fear began to twist into something different, something closer to oath. The general finally took a step forward, the sound of his boots cracking against the ground like thunder. His cloak swayed behind him, his shadow falling across her small frame, his voice deep and slow, cut through the silence. He asked her name, his tone more command than question, but she did not answer with hesitation. She spoke her name with clarity, then stood silent again, waiting, her calmness sharper than any sword. The recruits around her exchanged nervous glances, their hearts pounding faster. Some could not understand how she dared to answer him so directly. Others whispered beneath their breath that perhaps she was mad, yet even as they whispered they could not tear their eyes away from her, for there first was something in her voice, something in the way the general himself hesitated before speaking again, that told them she was not mad, she was something else entirely. The general studied her face, his eyes narrowing further, his silence deepening. He seemed to recognize something in her, though he gave no word of it, yet the soldiers could feel it, a shift, a tension pulling tighter, as though two storms had collided in the middle of the yard, her presence against his authority, and neither willing to bow. Then it happened, a faint shimmer across her chest. The plain fabric of her uniform seemed to flicker for an instant, like light catching on hidden metal. The soldiers closest to her gasped softly, their eyes widening. They had seen it, though only for a moment, an insignia, faint glowing, then vanishing again, as if refusing to remain hidden any longer. The general's eyes sharpened, the corner of his mouth tightened, but still he said nothing. The recruits, however, felt the ground beneath them shift in ways they could not explain. The whispers returned, thicker, stronger, flowing down the lines like wind. She was not who they thought she was. She was someone far higher, far greater, and the general knew it. The yard was silent, so silent that even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Every soldier stood frozen, their eyes locked on her, their ears still ringing with the boldness of her words, and their minds replaying the faint shimmer they had just seen. They wanted to dismiss it as a trick of the light, but deep down none of them could deny what they had witnessed, for it was too sharp, too real to be a mistake. She stood in the center of that silence, her face calm, her body still, her presence heavier than the weapons that lined the racks at the edge of the yard. And then, without warning, it happened again. The fabric across her chest glowed faintly, the shimmer building into a blaze of light, the plain uniform unraveling like smoke before their eyes, revealing what had been hidden all along, the insignia of rank, not ordinary, not even high, but the highest that any of them had ever seen. They soldiers gasped as one, a sound like a wave rushing across the yard. Their knees trembled, some instinctively lowered their heads, others simply stared wide-eyed, their mouths open, unable to form words, for they had never imagined that one who walked among them quietly, one who trained beside them, ate in silence beside them, would bear insignia greater than captains, greater than commanders, greater even than the general who stood before her. The general himself did not move, his face hardened. His eyes locked on the insignia that burned against her chest. The glow seared into the vision of every soldier, each symbol precise, each line carrying weight older than the camp itself. Her rank was beyond them all, her authority undeniable, her power sanctioned by the highest order. Their world could recognize the officers who had been ready to shout at her, now stood frozen, their voices gone, their eyes filled with disbelief. Some felt shame for having barked at her, others fear for what her presence truly meant. Their hearts raced as they realized she had walked quietly among them, not as a recruit, but as a test, as a shadow sent to measure them. And now the test had ended with her revelation. The soldiers whispered frantically, but their whispers carried no malice, only awe she had hidden in plain sight, and none had seen through it until now. The stories would spread. They knew stories, always did. One soldier leaned forward slightly, his voice breaking as he muttered, "She outranks him, she outranks even the general." The words traveled faster than any order, faster than any command. The truth, undeniable. She did not gloat, she did not smile, she only stood tall, her eyes still locked upon the general, as if the others did not matter, as if the entire yard had disappeared, leaving only the two of them standing in silence, facing one another. Her calm, unbroken, her presence unyielding. The general clenched his fists, his cloak shifting in the wind. He had spent years commanding fear, his name spoken with reverence and terror across the empire, yet now in his own yard, in front of his own men, a figure stood revealed whose rank placed her above him, and for the first time, a shadow of doubt passed across his face. Though fleeting, it was enough for every soldier to see. The insignia burned like fire across her chest, its glow undeniable, its meaning clear. Every soldier in the yard knew what it represented, even those who had never seen it before instinctively understood. It was the mark of supreme authority, the mark of one who commanded not a battalion, not a regiment, not even a single army, but the entire chain of command itself. She was not below the general, she was above him. The recruits who had once whispered about her fell to their knees, their heads lowered, their hearts pounding, not from fear but from reverence. The officers who had barked at her now stood stiff, their faces pale, their lips pressed tight as though the weight of their shame had silenced them completely. Even the captains who had walked through the camp with authority now bent their heads, for they knew there was no other choice. She stood silent in the center of the yard, her calm presence heavier than the silence that gripped the camp, her gaze locked on the general, as if all others no longer existed, the insignia on her chest still shimmering with faint light, as if alive, as if fueled by the eyes of those who looked upon it. Her posture unshaken, her authority needing no words to be recognized. The general remained, standing, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. The soldiers waited breathless for his reaction. Some expected an outburst, others feared violence, but what came was heavier than either. He took a slow step forward, his eyes burning into hers, and then with a movement that froze the breath in every chest, he lowered his head just enough to acknowledge her. Gasps rippled through the ranks. The sight of the general bowing even slightly was something no soldier had ever seen. It was the breaking of a wall they had thought immovable. It was the admission that her rank, her authority was real, undeniable, and greater than his. The camp itself seemed to shift, as if the very ground recognized a new order. The soldiers bowed, lowered, their weapons falling from their hands, their voices gone, the silence deeper than before, and in that silence the truth spread faster than fire. She was not a recruit, she was not a shadow, she was the one they would follow, the one who had hidden her rank until the moment demanded it, the one who stood, even the general still. She did not speak, no speech was needed, her silence carried more weight than words, her calm steadier than any command. She had revealed herself. Not to boast, not to humiliate, but to remind them all that power did not roar, it did not scream, it simply stood and waited, and when the time came, it revealed itself. The general lifted his head again, his eyes hard, his pride unbroken, yet tempered with recognition. He would not kneel, but he could not deny what had been revealed, and in that moment a quiet understanding passed between them, a storm of authority meeting another, and yielding only in the smallest of ways, yet enough for all who witnessed to remember forever. And so the story spread beyond the camp, whispered from soldier to soldier, carried to towns and cities, told with awe and reverence of the woman who wore no insignia until she faced the general and revealed her true rank. And from that day on, none who heard the tale ever forgot her name or the silence that shook the yard more than any command could.